Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for attending. My name is Alex Kramer, and I'm going to be walking you a little bit through today about HR strategies with AI. And today we're going to be talking about a handful of different subjects. We're going to start with kind of highlighting what is happening with large language models, understanding the fears related to AI and AGI, which we'll talk about a little later, discuss AI agents and how will AI impact HR, and then highlighting some strategic insights for your business. So we're going to have a question and answer period towards the end of this call. So if you do have any questions, feel free to use the message to send a message in or send a question, and then we will pick a couple of those at the end for everybody to answer. So I'm going to jump right into it. I know everyone's time is super valuable, so I want to make sure that we go quickly but learn a lot of stuff. So what's eBacon? For those of you who don't know who we are a software company that focuses on certified payroll and fringe benefit management, primarily for the construction industry. We've been in business for about 20 years building payroll, HR, and construction software for various industries. In the last 5 years, we've really started to focus more on the construction industry more specifically. One of the things that gives us a lot of advantage in building products, and especially when we get into the AI side of the marketplace later on, is that we do have our own software. We have our own team. I've worked at eBacon for the last 14 years. I have an interesting mix of background, originally from a marketing role in our company. I've been programming since I was very, very young. So I love engineering, I love technology. And I really enjoy kind of looking at how marketing and product and engineering kind of work together, not only to solve problems for customers today, but also to solve kind of the future of issues that we haven't yet identified. I'm very actively involved in different community efforts too, to bring in project-based education and hopefully bring some of the stuff that we're learning today into schools so they can have those opportunities to grow their students and learn more about this cool technology that we're going to be applying in the world. So I'll get started with the first thing. So what are large language models? So when we talk about AI, there's a lot of different things that we touch base on. One of those things is that we talk about let me say this much. AI is typically AI is typically thrown around as a very buzzy word today. And when a lot of people talk about AI today, they're talking about large language models. There's some other, lots of other ways you can define artificial intelligence, but for this meeting, we're going to actually talk about what are large language models and why they're important to businesses in the next 2 to 5 years, especially in the HR space. So for those of you who've actually played with it, ChatGPT and Bard are actually large language models. These are models that you can utilize to ask it questions, to summarize information, to parse resumes, to do different unstructured tasks. And so if you've used ChatGPT or if you use Bard, anytime that I say large language model, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, this industry moves very fast, very, very, very fast. And I want to mention that because when I wrote this, it was Bard, and it's now Google now renamed their platform to Gemini. So that's actually happened in the last, I think, 3 or 4 days. And they just released a brand new kind of AI that you can play with that solves some of the problems that we're actually going to be talking about today. And to kind of show you how fast the market's moved, OpenAI at the same time released a very interesting new tool for video creation. So you'll see that in the next couple of weeks here if you follow stuff. The other thing I want to touch base on today is artificial general intelligence. So why is that an important topic when we talk about AI? Some of the fears that you see thrown around the marketplace end up stemming from the fact that, like, if an AI like a large language model or other models or a group of different models like this kind of start working together, could they start thinking as a human, thinking on their own? And there's a lot of companies out there that are actually trying to go this path. One reason why these kind of AGIs are very interesting is if you look at a lot of the AI that's out today, or things that are purported to be AI, they solve like one very, very specific problem. They solve either, you know, a chatbot, or they solve a scheduling problem for the business, or a punching problem for the business, or something. The goal of AGI, artificial general intelligence, is to actually solve everything in one kind of tool and give it a little bit more ability to think and make choices on its own. So when we hear a lot of the fears of the marketplace, there's some fears on, you know, security, there's some fears on jobs, and then there's some security that, or some fears that kind of go far above that into, well, what if these computers could start thinking on their own? And that's a little bit further in the future, which we'll talk about in a little while next. So large language models. So from an HR perspective and from a business perspective, it's important to understand that like large language models are good at some things and absolutely terrible at other things. In our experimentation here at eBacon and kind of just reading and talking to other people, we know that it's fantastic at like summarizing content. So like in that first slide, or the slide before, I'd actually asked ChatGPT to summarize eBacon's homepage. But you can see even in that summary in the page before, it started to bring in a note about subscribing to our newsletter, which if you haven't, it's a good opportunity to subscribe. But that's not really what I was asking for, right? And so it's not, it's kind of taking stuff in, and it's going to repeat stuff that might not 100% always make sense. And when you look at summarizing content, you're always going to have to look at what gets outputted to make sure that it actually makes some kind of sense to the business. The second thing is generating questions. One thing I found really interesting about ChatGPT in general is that if you give it a, let's say you give it a resume, and you say, give me 10 questions about this, or give me 10 questions to ask the candidate about this resume, it can actually do a really good job of kind of like stimulating your thought process on what to ask. And what we've seen is that for some solutions, such as putting together, you know, summaries of handbooks or other tools, that asking kind of Socratic questions to the model actually produces some very interesting results that you can then use for asking the same question back to the model with the same information. So it's pretty useful. Another very useful thing is formatting unstructured data. So there's a lot of areas inside of like HR and construction and all these other areas where when you get into, let's say, a prevailing wage document, or you get into a like a timesheet or something like that, and you're just getting them filled out and handed in, that data is very unstructured, and historically it's been very hard in the technology sector to actually get that data in a format that we can actually utilize in a like kind of an engineering sense. And if you look at some of the ways that the LLMs are being built and how they're being used, a big usage of this is to take that unstructured data, give the model a formula for how to structure it, and then let the system kind of do the moving. And all of these things work because it's something that we can verify, right? We can verify the result of that. But if you ask ChatGPT to tell you what happened yesterday, that's not really verifiable, right? Like there might be opinion and it might be not actually up to date, but if it can take content you're passing in and summarize it or return it back to you in a different format, it's actually quite useful. And I kind of jokingly say sounding cool in front of younger coworkers. One of the tools I've used in it is there's one person who's on our marketing team who I won't name, but she knows who she is. And I like to use that because I like to kind of like talk back in a language that I don't understand. So it's great at translating things like language, or you could even teach it like a fake language and then teach it how to respond back to in that fake language. So that's pretty neat. What's it bad at? It's not great at novel ideas. So if you're asking it for a strategy to run your business, you're going to get a rehashed piece of content and it has no context of the real world. It can't think, so you're not getting anything that's like gonna like be like massively insightful that you haven't yet seen before in the marketplace. That's kind of where AGI becomes a potential opportunity in the future. It doesn't really understand things in a very nuanced level, so like it just doesn't get into the details that well. And if you provide it lots of small things, like lots of small supposed to say it like details, or say I've got all these rules and I want you to do all these things to the rules, it's just not very good at like understanding what you're talking about. And then reliable information. So as I mentioned earlier, like I wouldn't trust this to tell me anything about the world today. And even though systems like Bard are now being implemented inside of Google as kind of the default answer, they're still not 100% reliable on niche information. So if you've turned on inside of Google search, you can turn on a beta version of their new kind of AI chat feature. The results that you get on like mainstream things like, you know, find me a place to go take a kid who likes dinosaurs, that's very easy to find. And it can kind of summarize the content. But if you start asking about, like, let's say prevailing wage documentation or things that are related to the business, it starts to kind of fall apart a little bit, and it even starts to advertise products that don't relate to it because the SEO or the marketing side has done a good job. So you can't really rely on those models 100% to give you the answer on those kind of niche items, which is one of the things we'll talk about on why it's good and why it's not good. So where are we now, right, on LLMs? So we know what they're good at, we know what they're for. It sounded like a year ago we were at like the most amazing tool we've ever seen in our entire life, and this thing's going to change the world, and we're all going to lose our jobs next year. We should start firing people. And we're a year in of like from ChatGPT, or a year and a half into ChatGPT. It's super cool. It's being implemented into Office. It's being implemented this, but we're pretty much like at the top of a what Gartner, the technology hype cycle, calls the peak of inflated expectations. So like everyone's over like kind of at the top of this level of saying, we've tried and tried and tried to say that this is going to be the best thing ever, but when we try to implement this inside a business, it doesn't quite work. And a lot of the technology and kind of solutions that we're seeing that are coming out today in the marketplace are actually to deal with the limitations of the fact that it doesn't easily integrate into your business, right? So like if we look at some of the things we'll talk later on hiring, people are building additional platforms or additional chatbots that could hopefully integrate into your platform. But even OpenAI has said, like, going the other way as far as bringing in, you know, having like your HR platform in ChatGPT, no one really wants that, right? Like no one wants that kind of centralized ChatGPT knows everything, and they've had to switch it the other way on that side. So what we're seeing is that because the current LLMs are so overconfident when they're wrong, and because people are like very nervous about how LLMs and other generative AI are kind of changing the marketplace a little bit for even content creators, I don't feel like we've seen the same impact that we would have thought we would have seen like a year ago. Like nobody, like there are some people who might be losing their jobs over it, but it's not where you think it's at today. It's really on the way. It's kind of like, you know, it's there, but it's not necessarily tomorrow going to change the world or anything like that. If you've looked at some of the technology that's come out recently, let's say if you look at like what Samsung has done with AI, or with what LG is doing with AI, they're kind of just rebranding things as the AI washing machine, or the AI dishwasher, or the AI stovetop. But when you actually like ask the questions for like, how is this artificial intelligence, it just, the word AI kind of slapped on top of it, right? So like your expectation of this thing cooking your food for you, or doing all these awesome tasks like you're typing in GPT, like it's pretty much what we were at last year on a lot of this stuff. So Gartner says that a lot of this generative stuff is not going to be really impactful and involved until like 2 to 5 years from today. And I think that's a pretty good time frame as far as saying like, when is technologists like myself and my team can be able to actually integrate this and then make it actually productive for you. And what you'll see if you look at some of the hype cycles and the way things work is that what you see is that inside of the hype cycle, and it's pretty clear for lots of different technologies, we go through a point where everything's like, we thought everything was going to be great, and then things aren't great. And like I would argue we're probably closer to the disillusionment stage, but Gartner actually puts it at the very peak of overinflation right now. So we'll see that kind of change. So the first insight here, strategic insight, is like, beware the hype. So you have to understand when you're picking software, when you're researching software today, when you're looking at technology, what is an LLM? What is AI? What is not AI, right? And much like I said before, like you look at some of the new dishwashers or TVs or something, and they're promising AI this and AI that. it's a lot of marketing. It's just a lot of marketing speak. It's a lot of stuff that probably was in the previous versions. It just now we named it AI. And we've seen this in the past, right? If you follow technology, you know, for a while, everything was supposed to be blockchain. Everything was supposed to be cryptocurrency. You know, everything was supposed to be IoT. Everything was going to be drones, right? There's always that kind of peak of technology, especially as people start hyping it up to kind of build new products on the back of it. But then when you get it into the hands of people, it doesn't work quite that well. And it takes a couple of years to actually work out to like, what's the value in the marketplace for that technology. I kind of point out this company that I won't specifically name, but I was doing some research on some HRS systems the other day, and they had mentioned kind of like AI-powered labor optimization. And like, if anyone's ever worked with scheduling software before, they probably understand that like most scheduling software has optimization, like the ability to optimize your schedule and optimize who should work where. And there's a lot of studies that have been done on this for a very long time. Is it AI, right? Like maybe, like it's a computer doing your work for you, but is it LLMs? Is it like artificial generalized intelligence? No, not really, right? Like that, it's not that level of like of revolutionary, and it's just a title that's being used. So when you're starting to examine these things, ask the questions, right? Ask the questions like, what is the AI actually doing in this thing? What is the AI actually doing differently than what it did 2 years ago, right? And if you're hearing the same stuff, it's not that technology is bad, or it's not that it's not useful for your business or for your needs. It's just that there's a little bit of marketing speak that you're going to have to get through to get to the actual, like, you know, core of what the impact to your business is. So that's the first kind of insight here, is just beware of the hype. Always ask questions on it, especially in conversations with people who just want to throw that term around, or if you're internal and talking about it with other leaders in your business, and they want to just say, I want AI in the business to reduce costs. Just ask the question of what that actually is, right? Ask the question of how that impacts the business, and don't just kind of take it at face value that it says AI, right? So why do we talk about the fears of AI and AGI in particular? Today, like, most AI is very specific to one need, and it requires a ton of data to get to that point. And if you look at LLMs, one of the reasons why they're so interesting, and one of the reasons why they're so hard to build, is because they require a significant amount of data and power to get to the answer. And if we talk about like an AGI or other solutions, which people are trying to build, it's going to require a lot of data and power and other things to actually get that done. There was a article I read the other day that OpenAI was looking for something like $7 trillion to build out some of the new technology they need. So you can kind of look into that and say like, wow, that's going to be a lot of money to build these models and build these technologies. But what is kind of the problem? So what are people scared of in the AI side? One side is a job side, which I'll go into a little later on. As far as like, hey, these things are going to take my job. It's going to take 90% of jobs in the market, that kind of argument. But a lot of the times when you hear what the government was responding to, you're hearing more of kind of a theoretical thing. So one thing, and it's a very highly interesting subject, is like the paperclip problem. So what's the paperclip problem? Well, I'm going to explain it actually more in terms of business. So if you have an artificial generalized intelligence that can do anything and has no limits on it, at which limit does that technology stop from fulfilling its goal? So let's say you say, I want a AGI that makes sure that my employees at my business are happy, and you give it no limits except for making sure that you score 100% and that every employee is happy and every employee is rich, and you know what I mean, I want to make sure that, you know, I retain employees at 100%. Really the question is, when you tell a machine that, the machine doesn't necessarily understand its limits. And at what point does it become a genie that just starts granting wishes? At what point do I, as an employee, just say like, well, I love a Lamborghini and that would make me really happy, right? I mean, it's a rhetorical kind of wild conversation, but it's some of the fears, because when we talk about employee happiness, you could kind of say, well, of course I'd stop it at giving Alex a Lamborghini. But how does the machine know that, right? How does the machine understand those limitations? How does the machine not realize that they shouldn't go above and beyond what's supposed to be happening? Now, the paperclip problem is a very interesting one because the parallel in there is people having a conversation about if you tell a paperclip factory to optimize itself, at which point does it stop trying to just consume all the resources in the world to optimize itself? Again, it's kind of a fun solution or a fun thought process, but it's something that kind of keeps up some people at night, especially when they think about AI and what the impact is. And the other kind of big question is like, who will end up owning the more powerful AI models? What we've seen is like the government is trying to respond to add more boundaries into the marketplace, to add a little bit more safety kind of barriers to prevent some of the worst things that could happen. But one of the questions, of course, is like, we have OpenAI who runs ChatGPT. We have Google who's running Bard and now Gemini. We have Chinese companies who are manufacturing their own LLMs to produce or to complete certain tasks. And the question is like, if the power is so high on these things and the impact is so high, will that just end up being another kind of monopoly situation? And who's going to own this technology, and who's going to be able to have access to it? If you look at OpenAI, they even kind of famously at the very start of building their software said, we're going to put a limit on how much we can make, because if we ever get to a point where we turn a bot loose, it's going to make us a lot of money effectively, but we don't want to go, to rule the world or anything like that. So the government's kind of responding to some of those kind of existential threats. The order on safe and secure and trustworthy AI was an executive order that was placed. We've already seen some movement because of that. That order requires a lot more kind of guardrails to be created by the government, and a lot more guardrails to be placed on big companies before they release models that could impact more things. Some of the things they talk about inside of that discussion, though, or inside of that document, though, is like they want to have strict rules for like biological standards. So they don't want people building models that create viruses that just go wild and destroy populations or something like that. But it also establishes other specific rules, like the other day, the FTC banned robocallers from being allowed to utilize AI-generated voices, which we're going to get to in a second. And then when we look at the EU, if you're doing international work or anything like that, there's even more stringent rules that are coming down the pipeline. And if you're in that space, if you haven't already been aware of all those different rules, it's time to start thinking about that and how that impacts your business. So what should you actually worry about tomorrow? Like we talked about a robot maybe taking over the world, or an AI that can make paperclips until it dooms society. That's all great. You should be worried tomorrow the fact that someone can use your grandmother's voice or grandfather's voice and call you with it. We're already seeing the ability for us to easily spoof voices. Right now, it's down to 3 to 5 seconds of your voice allows you, but also anyone trying to impersonate you, the ability to actually like type anything in and then get that voice outputted. Is that part of an LLM? Not necessarily yet, but it's how it's not the same thing as an LLM, but that kind of AI is something to be far more worried about than AGI. There's also been a recent example in, I think it was Hong Kong, where a company CFO was brought onto a Zoom call, and it looked like the CEO and 2 other employees were in that room at the same time. And he said, this is a little weird. Like, why are they calling me, asking me to transfer money? But because they were moving and they were talking like real, the employee actually transferred a huge sum of money, right, to the bank account. So really, what I'd say right now is like, you need to be aware from HR perspective on the ability and the scammers' ability to utilize these tools and these technologies to really make a ginormous impact to getting in the weeds of your business and stealing stuff from you, right? You need to be aware of the fact that people can spoof voices. You need to be aware of the fact that people can even spoof deep fake videos and have kind of maybe not the fastest realistic conversation with you, but there's things there. From another part of the HR perspective is the ease at which an employee can be kind of faked, especially in software engineering roles. is going to continue to grow. And if you work in the software engineering hiring field, you probably see a ton of fake resumes and ton of people that if you call them, they're not in the place they say they are, or it's just not the real, it's just not very accurate. And it's going to become easier and easier for people in that area to kind of like, maybe you're gonna hire somebody, you've talked to them, you've never seen them before, they've answered the questions quite well, they've done the code sample very well, but are they actually the person you're talking to, or are they somebody who's spoofing you to just have a second or third job, right? Those are going to be all difficult things, and I think right now we're going to be seeing more and more of that, and it's something that your team should be aware of on the fact that that could happen, right? You have to figure out motive on that side, and why are people doing this? If someone wants to phish your company to get a password or something like that, and they spoof the voice of the CEO and a video of a CEO, does the team know how to tell the difference? And do you have the right controls in place to manage that? So kind of going from that to jobs though. So does the current incarnation and future outcomes of AI impact jobs? Yeah, but no. So one of the examples, as our team was kind of talking through this, is like we look at like a milkman, right? And they're very prevalent until effective refrigeration and supply chains remove the need from them, right? We changed our model, they're no longer there. They might be there in some context for some small dairies or something, but we're not necessarily bemoaning the fact that that job is gone. We just know that there's other things that have happened, right? Other things that are going in there. There's actually a great website called Will Robots Take My Job, and it looks at all the different details of AI and all these different technologies to see, like, ask the question, will robots take my job? So worth kind of digging into and worth looking on that side. So much like the safety side, there's a little bit of an exaggeration of what the current large language models and AI can accomplish. We're more likely to see like Office get AI features this year that you can purchase. There's going to be a new Copilot button that opens up ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot in your browser on your Windows machines by just a click of a button. So those different features will really enhance the ability for your team to perform. But you have to ask yourself, if you really had focused engineers on solving the problem of, let's say, responding to customer emails in a standardized way, or comparing resume results against a job thing, would that have been something that a human would have done in the first place, or this is just enhancing a human to do that job? A lot of what's been theorized, as I mentioned, is just kind of rote. So it's just kind of stuff that's like, if you have a customer success team, and that customer success team doesn't necessarily solve problems outside of just kind of forwarding an email in a certain circumstance, and they're not necessarily doing like phone calls with that customer, then are their jobs potentially higher at risk than a software engineer? Very likely, yes. So should be aware of those risks, but it's probably not going to be to a point, in my prediction, from what I've read on a lot of other predictions, of like us needing to implement some kind of universal basic income because no one can ever have a job again, right? Now, going back to the hypothetical of AGI that can, take, employee happiness to an extreme, maybe in that sense, but again, that's a very long way off, technology-wise. So strategic insight number 2, some jobs will be lost, but it's how you embrace the tools that makes a difference. So in the next 2 to 5 years, you're going to see a just ton of HR tools that are focused around AI. You're going to see a ton of things come into the market and drop off the market very, very, very quickly, because all the startups that have founded off the back of OpenAI, they're going to succeed or fail off the back of OpenAI, and I wouldn't necessarily trust that they're going to be around at the end of the day, right? Like I would say, like maybe if there's 5,000 of them, a couple hundred of them will survive. That also means that you need to be aware that the fact that, like, if you're using a really great tool, it might not be around tomorrow. In that context, it might merge with another tool. So what's more important today is like understanding what tools are coming to the market, making sure that your team has the opportunity to actually like interact with those tools, and not necessarily stopping them from using those tools, and instead kind of like encouraging that experimentation, so long as the security is safe. So that's the kind of main thing that you'll want to touch with your security teams on, like, hey, is this a safe thing to do or not? Again, going back to the insight number one, we want to kind of point out that you want to find tools that are not just hype, and you want to find tools that are not just somebody sitting at a computer finishing something that you sent them. If you've looked at like expense receipts, there's a lot of companies that say, hey, we'll scan your expense receipt and put, kind of put that in the system for you. Turns out that a lot of them can't solve the problem today, and they just have somebody in another country just type that in on demand, right? So is it AI? Not really, right? They haven't solved the problem. They're trying to solve the problem, but they haven't done it. And then kind of last note here is, from a tool perspective, that over automation will hurt you as much as under automation. So just 3 days ago, Air Canada lost a lawsuit in Canadian courts because their chatbots specifically mentioned how there was a certain rate that the passenger was going to get for bereavement if they flew on the plane. They didn't get that rate. The passenger screenshotted it, took him to court, and won in court after kind of a lengthy back and forth, right? And it's just kind of a good example of, like, you can rely on chatbots and you can hope chatbots are going to make the right decision, but you still need to have a human potentially reviewing those things and not getting into the weeds on that. The other thing I'll say is, like, if you've read Walter Isaacson's book on Elon Musk, very interesting book, there's a point in there where he bemoans the fact that he put too many robots in his factory, and there's a kind of vivid image of them opening up a huge hole in the side of the building and just taking robots and throwing them out the window, right, effectively, because they just were not going as fast as what humans could do. They just were not as optimized on that side. So with any of the tools, how you use them is going to make a huge difference, and how you implement in your business will be very, very important. So what are the implications for HR? So first off, one of the areas that I'm very interested in, I've been researching a lot myself, is AI agents. So what's an agent? An agent acts almost like an employee at your company completing tasks that you need to complete. So how does that specifically work? So let's say that your business has only a couple employees in the HR payroll team, and you want to, your company wants to start doing performance management or doing a better job of time attendance. But that all takes time from somebody to follow up with employees, to get the things set up in the system, to make sure people are doing their job properly. It's just a lot of like kind of micromanagement. But what if you could, in your HR system, hire an employee that got you onboarded for performance management, made sure that other employees were getting their documents in, that could take your cues on what you need to do next and be the one who actually kind of owns the process a little bit more, right? So in that instance, it's not necessarily that they are, they're slightly autonomous with your instruction, but they actually could do some of the work for you, especially in the follow-up, and especially in the kind of like, hey, I'm waiting for this document to get submitted, right? Can you have systems today that notify employees and message employees? Absolutely, right? There's tools that like in our system today, and instead of eBacons, if an employee hasn't approved their time, you can get a warning, or if they have changed time, you can get a warning. But it's kind of different when you start looking at how agents could interact with those employees in a more natural level and at kind of a tone that makes more sense. And when you look at agents and what they can do just today, and just what ChatGPT and LLMs can do today, they do a great job of analyzing or kind of repeating back summaries of documents. So if an employee does a performance review, there's a great opportunity inside of that, using agents and other technology, to kind of give you the feedback what you need to know about that employee's review, and then to summarize that content into bigger insights for your business. So agents are something that I think will actually be massively impactful for HR companies, or sorry, for HR teams, because it will just allow you to scale your resources and implement more tools which you can get better insights into your business. I'm going to go into hiring here in a second, because I believe hiring is going to be one of the most impacted sections. But where are agents out there in the real world? So a lot of software engineers have been using a thing called AutoGPT. And AutoGPT is a tool that allows us to kind of like ask questions and like have this thing go ask itself questions and then bring us back answers and kind of do some research project for us. It can even build some levels of boilerplate code for us. So there's some interesting kind of like autonomous, it's kind of autonomous, but it's more of like, it kind of questions itself and does stuff. There's a company called artisan.co that are agents that can work hand in hand with your team. It's a very interesting concept. It's kind of what I'm describing above, where you're hiring something or somebody to do a task for your company. And I believe we'll see more and more of those out. And then Y Incubator, who's a very popular startup incubator, is actually actively seeking startups who are going to be building new large language models for manual back office processes and legacy softwares, and also AI to build enterprise software. So it's kind of important to know that those things are on the cusp, and that if you see things that are agents and you can actually interact with them and they're actually kind of doing stuff for you, we might see that a lot sooner rather than later. So what's in the pipeline for HR? So I kind of wanted to break down like from the research I've seen and just like the reality of the technology. Like if you take different like subjects inside of HR and you say, you know, you've got your hiring, you've got goal setting, you've got time and attendance reviews, payroll, benefits, training, and then just general human resources. Like what's the reality of like us saying there's no need to have an HR team and the robot can do it, right? That's a lot more fantasy today than reality from where the technology's at. Compared to like headcount planning, which is a little closer here. And I would expect to see like bots that can help you kind of assist you in those planning processes a lot sooner than later. But things like recruiting cold candidates and screening resumes, that's here now. There's actually technology we're going to see that you can actually start playing with and using in your hiring process. So there's a lot of information on this slide. Like if you watch back, you can kind of read through some of these later on. I'm not going to go through each individual detail unless someone has a question on it. So focusing on hiring. So why I want to focus on hiring is because I think that most employees would say the worst part of getting a job is going through the hiring process, and most employers would say the worst part of bringing employees on board is trying to find them. And there's been so many attempts to solve that problem. And most like applicant tracking systems you see on the market today, they're using some level of like kind of primitive resume parsing and keyword filtering. But it really doesn't help you that much. It's really not that impactful. And in fact, it kind of makes employees a little mad, because if you could hack those kind of ATSs, you're going to get in front of people. And if you can put yourself in a position where you understand how they work, you're going to get in front of other people. They're also not very good at kind of finding candidates in the rough, and they're not really great at actually understanding how candidates could perform in your business. I think personally that like in our world, in the software engineering side, we're looking at sometimes 2,500 resumes in 3 to 6 days just for one role, and actually being able to go through all of those is almost impossible. Like it's like you have to kind of have high level filtering just to toss out things that just don't match, but you're not getting any ability to kind of like actually analyze that information. So there's a couple AI companies already kind of on the market that's starting to do this. So PeopleGPT is one that we're experimenting with here at eBacon, which allows you to set up a list of potential employees or potential emails or names of people, and its job kind of as an agent is to go try to get them to apply to your job. So it's going to do the legwork of emailing them, of messaging them, kind of building the cadence for you so that you don't have to do it yourself. And that kind of allows you to scale and kind of hunt down the candidates you want to apply to your role versus kind of just waiting for kind of passive candidates to come into your side. Or if you're actively recruiting people, it reduces the amount of work it takes to actively recruit a large scale of people. Systems like Chatter, which focuses more on hiring hourly employees, has a lot of great chatbots and integrations that allows you to kind of scale out your hiring process on that side. But I would really say, like, if you just kind of start looking at AI hiring or LLM integrated hiring, it's going to be one of the quicker hit solutions. So where will they help us out even further? Resume scanning or screening, sorry. It's really primitive. And if you can think about it, one of the things that, so like if you've hired engineers before or people in software, typically they'll send you like a GitHub link, which is like a link of all the stuff that they worked on from a coding perspective. Even as a hiring manager, it's very hard to compare GitHub A versus GitHub B. But I believe that it's going to become more and more important for employees to have some website or some kind of code or some kind of indication of what they can do that can be summarized, right? So if you can quickly summarize your experience and show why you're better than the other person, it's not necessarily that your GitHub has to be the best set up or your website has to be the best set up, but as these systems get more sophisticated and they allow more inputs, your ability to kind of like have a well-organized portfolio on the internet might become as important as your resume, maybe even more important because it's an actual example of your real work, right? Going back to one of the problems before though, is that engineering especially will be very impacted by this kind of stuff, because engineering is going to have to deal with the fact that like it's so far easier to just write or utilize AI to build out code too. So there's going to be a trade-off to that. But I think that if you look at the current tools and what's coming out, you should be looking especially on hiring as one of your first places to be disrupted, and one of the first places you'll be able to take advantage of these different models. So I want to talk a little bit about like what is eBacon doing? What are we specifically focusing on this marketplace? So we've been watching generative AI and trying to understand like how that fits into our products. A lot of what you've seen in this presentation so far has been kind of the theory behind what we're going to do, and now we're working towards implementation of it. So how would a company like eBacon, which is an HRS time attendance and payroll platform, implement these things? One is to help employees ask common questions of their pay stubs, their handbooks, their benefits, improving the effectiveness of performance reviews, making sure that people actually do them. Same thing with like making sure that time attendance is less of a chore for companies. We found that because you can look at unstructured data and start doing a lot more test on it and kind of structuring it, there might be better opportunities for companies to kind of like not have such a lift to get time attendance implemented in their business. And then just overall better customer service by having these tools kind of generating the questions that we need to help support our customers. We want to implement more AI and LLMs into construction-specific workflows. So we have some new tools coming out very soon that help construction companies on the job site, and we want to make sure that that LLMs are kind of like at the forefront of that, such as like helping you look at note taking and how does that impact into the actual job, and how can you summarize all the notes on the job to kind of get a status of those jobs and that kind of stuff. And then research into unstructured data. So why this is important is there's a lot of data in our field that's like very hard to build from an engineering perspective. So what we're attempting to do today is figure out how we kind of utilize LLMs to take that unstructured information, such as like, let's say a prevailing wage document, and then turn that into an actual thing that a computer can read, right? Because a computer just has a really hard time with an unformatted, unstructured document, but the LLMs are very good at backing into them. So those are a couple things that we're kind of working towards. So last thing on the strategic insight before we get the questions is AI tools will be disjointed from our core systems, and integration and broader adaptation will take time. So we're going to see things like Office have Copilot. We're going to see most software engineers have access to LLMs very soon. But those things are going to be a little bit more isolated. And what we've seen in the marketplace, especially from larger HRIS products, is that they're not necessarily the ones who are going to be at the forefront. They're going to potentially build some kind of integrations, but those integrations aren't going to be as tightly integrated and tightly wound into those systems. So if you look at like daily pay offerings, so today you can go out and utilize the ability for people to get pay next day effectively from what their paycheck is. Most big companies and most big organizations that do HRS systems have happily kind of outsourced that to a third party that you can sign up to. I believe that these tools need to be better ingrained inside of your platforms, and that's one of the things that we're trying to work towards here at eBacon. But I suspect that a lot of the really cool HR tools will be stuff, or HR and especially applicant tracking tools, will be stuff that doesn't quite fit into your flow right now. You're just gonna have to kind of like play with it and learn it. and then hopefully there's an integration in the future. Like I think that integration point is the secondary thought today versus just getting into the hands of people and letting them learn it. I'd also say that it's unlikely that the tools you utilize in the next 6 months will be the same tools you use in the next 3 years. Like you should be ready to like rapidly look at these tools and their changes, and if they're staying in business, and make those changes as fast as possible, and not be worried if employees are experimenting with these items. So that's the 3 insights. I'm going to jump into questions if there's questions on the chat. I got to check on here. So one question is, in the short term, do you think deep fakes and false information are the biggest concern around AI misuse? Yes. So I think that is one of the kind of biggest threats that we see today, is that like people can just kind of utilize your voice, or utilize what's it called, your face, for kind of attacking you or your family, or kind of doing those kinds of things. And since you can tie those things so neatly and nicely into LLMs to then generate what seems like a more realistic message from the person, it's going to become easier and easier and easier for people to kind of like phish you or scam you. So I'd say that that's probably an early concern that will get solved at some point somehow. I don't necessarily know what solutions are coming on the marketplace to like let you know that the person on the phone is the person you're talking to on the phone. It would be great to see what's actually coming out to verify that the person's voice. So should be there. And then I have a question like, what's your favorite LLM to use? I personally jump around them a lot. I don't necessarily use one or the other one. And that's because I think it's important to kind of like experiment with these different solutions and to understand what is good and what is bad, right? Like, so what things are actually useful, what things are actually not going to work at all. And I've actually seen that like some tools, like if you look at like generative AI for images, the new stuff from Gemini, or Google and Gemini, are a lot better than what we had for Stable Diffusion, which is another kind of generative image AI, but they're not as easy to use on your local computer, right? So I might be more inclined to use the one that I can use infinitely versus the one that I might have tokens for or something, right? So it's hard to kind of say which one I like because I jump around them. So if anyone has any other questions, I'll be on for a few more minutes to answer questions, but otherwise that concludes the webinar. So if you have any questions, let me know and I'll answer them for sure. Thank you though. So I have a question. How do you think businesses will balance the benefits of AI technologies versus the increased cost of AI computing power and data storage? I think that it will be constantly a focus. What's the best way to say this? If you look at like how cloud-based computing has really improved the ability to scale technology, that has given the opportunity for people who run cloud-based systems to make a lot more money off of it, and to then abstract the cost of running those systems away from you to just kind of like a recurring subscription fee. And if you look at the costs that are required to actually run ChatGPT, it's actually quite enormous. And if you look at the cost that it costs to actually run Bard, it's quite enormous too. So you have to kind of balance it as far as like the impact that it's going to have your business. And you have to also say to yourself, how many of these things am I repeating? So where I think one on the business side you'll see is, let's say like a handbook, right? Does it make sense that every single time somebody asks a question about a handbook to plug that handbook into a LLM and then generate the same answer over and over again? No, it's going to take so much power and so much time. But what if you stored that answer somewhere else? That's where the advantage of the business will the business will gain the advantage for having the question answered, but then having the question kind of cached or stored for later. And I actually think that that's going to be something we see really soon, because like it's just very costly to kind of keep throwing stuff through the system, right? But I also think what's nice about that is that the way that those things will be cached and stored will actually allow you to generate more questions and more questions and more questions on top of that one, which will make it so that if you have a knowledge base, or if you have kind of like a help desk software, it's going to be easier for other people to search for that same question in the very long run. So it's a great question, and it kind of there's a bunch of different ways. For novel uses, it's going to end up being more expensive, but for things that can be saved for later and not re-asked the same time 50 times, you're going to actually see a much cheaper cost, because it's just going to be a database you store those questions in. If there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this a little early and give everyone back some time in their day. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much.